We live in a world obsessed with appearances. From meticulously curated social media feeds to the polite smiles exchanged in professional settings, there is an almost universal pressure to present a specific version of ourselves, a version that is often, above all, good. We see it in the parent who volunteers tirelessly for the school, perhaps masking resentment, or the colleague who always offers to help, even when overwhelmed, driven by a fear of appearing selfish. There's the friend who publicly champions every social cause, yet privately struggles with empathy. This pervasive societal script subtly, or sometimes overtly, encourages us to perform our morality, to display our virtues for public consumption. We learn early on that being good earns approval, avoids criticism, and secures our place within the tribe. But what is the true cost of this performance, and how much of our goodness is genuine versus a meticulously constructed facade designed to earn approval, avoid judgment, or even manipulate perception? This essay explores the complex, often unconscious phenomenon of the good person facade, the strategic or habitual construction of a virtuous self-image. We will delve into the psychological mechanisms that drive this facade, examining how the ego constructs and defends it, and integrate these insights with profound spiritual wisdom that reveals its implications for authenticity, inner peace, and genuine connection. Our journey is not about demonizing inherent goodness, but about discerning authentic virtue from performative morality, leading to deeper healing and spiritual awakening. To unravel this intricate human pattern, we will draw from both contemporary psychological research and ancient spiritual traditions. Psychologically, we will examine concepts such as impression management, self-presentation theory, cognitive dissonance, the Jungian shadow, and the role of early attachment patterns in shaping this performative self. We will explore how the human brain's desire for social acceptance and the avoidance of cognitive discomfort contribute to maintaining this carefully crafted persona. Spiritually, we will explore Christian teachings on hypocrisy, pride, and the call to inner purity, contrasting outward piety with true devotion. Buddhist concepts of ego, attachment to identity, and the suffering, dukkha, arising from clinging to a virtuous self-image will offer profound insights. Sufi wisdom on riya, showing off, and the paramount importance of ikhlas, sincerity in actions, will illuminate the path toward inner truth. Hindu notions of maya, illusion, and avidya, ignorance, will help us understand the delusive nature of the facade, while existential philosophy's emphasis on authenticity and the dangers of bad faith will underscore the profound personal responsibility involved. By weaving these diverse perspectives, we aim to uncover both the adaptive functions and the profound costs of maintaining such a facade. We will explore its modern manifestations in digital culture and public discourse, illustrate its impact through brief historical and contemporary examples, and ultimately offer practical psychological and spiritual pathways toward genuine integration, humility, and the courageous embrace of our whole imperfect selves. This integrated approach seeks to move beyond surface-level morality to a deeper understanding of human motivation, fostering a path toward virtue that is rooted in truth, not performance. At its core, the good person facade represents a discrepancy between one's internal experience and external presentation. Psychologically, it can be understood as a sophisticated form of impression management or self-presentation, where individuals consciously or unconsciously strategize to control how others perceive them. This facade is often driven by a fundamental human need for social acceptance, a deep-seated fear of rejection, or a desire to maintain a positive self-concept in the eyes of others. It is a constructed persona, a mask worn in social interactions, which may differ significantly from the individual's private thoughts, feelings, and motivations. This performance can range from subtle acts of politeness to grand gestures of charity, all subtly or overtly aimed at reinforcing an image of virtue. Spiritually, the facade speaks to deeper issues of ego, attachment to reputation, and a fundamental misalignment with one's true nature or the divine. In Christian traditions, this phenomenon is often termed hypocrisy, a state where outward piety or moral adherence masks inner corruption, self-righteousness, or a lack of genuine love. Jesus frequently condemned the Pharisees for their ostentatious displays of religiosity, famously stating, "Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them, for then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven." Matthew 6:1. This highlights the spiritual principle that true virtue stems from internal disposition and pure intention, not from the desire for external praise. Sufism, the mystical branch of Islam, identifies riya, showing off or ostentation, as a major spiritual disease and an obstacle to sincere devotion. Riya occurs when actions, even good ones, are performed with the intention of gaining admiration or praise from others rather than solely for the sake of God. The Quran states, "Woe to those who pray but are heedless of their prayer, those who make show of their deeds." Surah Al-Ma'un 107:4-6. This emphasizes that the heart's intention is paramount, and any action performed with a hidden agenda for human approval undermines its spiritual value. In Buddhism, the good person facade relates to the ego's attachment to a virtuous identity, a subtle form of craving, tanha, that perpetuates suffering. Dukkha, clinging to a self-image, even a good one, is seen as a barrier to realizing anatta, no self, and the interconnectedness of all beings. The facade is thus another manifestation of the ego's elaborate defense mechanisms, designed to solidify a separate desirable self, rather than resting in the egoless awareness of the present moment. This initial understanding sets the stage for a deeper exploration into the psychological roots and spiritual dimensions of this ubiquitous human tendency. As we concluded in our initial exploration, the good person facade manifests as a complex interplay between our internal landscape and our external presentation. Now we delve deeper, moving beyond definition to understand the intricate psychological and spiritual motivations that compel us to construct and maintain this elaborate persona, and how these motivations manifest across the various canvases of human interaction. We ask, what are the deep-seated needs and fears that fuel this performance? And how do these underlying currents shape our daily behaviors, often without our conscious awareness? Psychologically, the impulse to present a good self is deeply rooted in our fundamental human need for connection and belonging. From a more attachment theory perspective, our earliest experiences with caregivers shape our understanding of acceptance and rejection. Individuals who developed insecure attachment styles, anxious, preoccupied, dismissive, avoidant, or fearful avoidant, may be particularly prone to constructing facades. Those with anxious, preoccupied styles might constantly seek external validation and approval, believing their inherent worth is contingent upon others' positive perceptions. They might become hyper-vigilant to social cues, adapting their behavior to meet perceived expectations, often sacrificing their authentic needs in the process. Conversely, individuals with dismissive avoidant styles, while appearing self-sufficient, might use the facade of goodness to maintain distance and avoid true intimacy, presenting a polished, unblemished exterior to prevent others from getting too close and discovering perceived flaws. For them, Being good might be a strategy to avoid vulnerability and the potential for rejection that comes with genuine connection. Beyond attachment patterns, the fear of rejection and judgment stands as a formidable architect of the facade. Our brains are hardwired for social connection. Ostracism historically meant a threat to survival. This ancient fear persists in modern society, manifesting as a profound anxiety about social exclusion, criticism, or disapproval. To mitigate this risk, we often resort to impression management, carefully curating our actions, words, and even our expressed emotions to align with what we believe is socially acceptable or desirable. We perform acts of kindness, offer unsolicited help, or express agreeable opinions, not purely from an altruistic impulse, but often from a subconscious desire to be liked, to fit in, or to avoid being seen as bad, selfish, or difficult. The parent who volunteers for every school event, despite being overwhelmed, or the colleague who consistently takes on extra work without complaint, may be operating from this deep-seated fear, believing their value or acceptance is tied to their performative goodness. Social conditioning and cultural pressures further amplify these psychological drivers. From childhood, we are taught the virtues of sharing, politeness, obedience, and selflessness. While these lessons are essential for social cohesion, they can inadvertently create a rigid framework where being good becomes synonymous with suppressing authentic emotions, avoiding conflict, and always prioritizing others' needs over our own. In a world increasingly dominated by digital culture and public discourse, this pressure is intensified. Social media platforms, in particular, have become vast stages for the performance of the good person facade. Here, virtue signaling, the conspicuous expression of moral values, often to enhance one's own standing, is rampant. Individuals post about charitable donations, express outrage over injustices, or share curated images of their perfect lives, not always from a place of genuine conviction, but often to garner likes, positive comments, or to project an image of moral superiority. The constant feedback loop of social media rewards performative goodness, inadvertently training us to prioritize external validation over internal integrity. Moreover, the facade can serve as a mechanism for self-esteem regulation. For individuals grappling with underlying insecurities or a fragile sense of self-worth, presenting a good persona can offer a temporary boost. If others perceive us as kind, generous, or virtuous, we may internalize these positive appraisals, using them to prop up a shaky self-concept. This creates a precarious cycle. Our self-worth becomes dependent on external validation, compelling us to maintain the facade even when it becomes emotionally exhausting or misaligned with our true feelings. The dissonance between our inner experience and our outer presentation can lead to anxiety, resentment, and a profound sense of inauthenticity, yet the perceived benefits of maintaining the facade often outweigh the internal cost, at least in the short term. Spiritually, the motivations behind the good person facade often stem from the ego's pervasive desire for recognition and its misinterpretation of genuine virtue. Many spiritual traditions emphasize humility, selfless service, and inner transformation. However, the ego, ever cunning, can co-opt these noble ideals, turning acts of piety or kindness into opportunities for self-aggrandizement. As we touched upon earlier, in Sufism, this is encapsulated by the concept of riya, showing off, where good deeds are performed with the intention of being seen and praised by others, rather than solely for the sake of the divine or out of pure compassion. The act itself may appear virtuous, but the underlying motivation contaminates its spiritual essence, transforming it from an act of devotion into an act of egoic performance. This spiritual distortion often arises from a misunderstanding of spiritual teachings. We might confuse the outward observance of religious rituals or moral codes with true inner transformation. For instance, attending religious services, fasting, or making public declarations of faith can become performative acts designed to impress one's community or even to convince oneself of one's own piety, rather than being expressions of a deeply felt spiritual connection or genuine ethical commitment. Jesus frequently condemned the Pharisees for precisely this reason, observing their public prayers and almsgiving as theatrical displays aimed at human applause, rather than sincere devotion. Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them, he cautioned, for then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. Matthew 6:1. This highlights a crucial distinction between acts performed for external reward and those born from internal conviction. Furthermore, a fear of divine judgment can paradoxically fuel the facade. Some individuals might perform good deeds or adhere strictly to religious laws out of a fear of punishment in the afterlife, rather than from a place of love, compassion, or a genuine desire to embody spiritual principles. This fear-based piety, while perhaps leading to outwardly moral behavior, often lacks the inner freedom and transformative power of authentic spiritual practice. It is a compliance born of apprehension, not a blossoming of true virtue. The individual becomes a diligent performer, meticulously checking off moral boxes, yet may remain internally untouched by the spirit of the law, experiencing spiritual life as a burden rather than a liberation. These psychological and spiritual motivations coalesce to manifest the good person facade across virtually all domains of our lives. In her personal relationships, the facade can be seen in the friend who never expresses their true feelings to avoid conflict, always agreeing or playing the role of the perpetual peacemaker, even if it means stifling their own needs and boundaries. It appears in the parent who sacrifices everything for their children, often to the point of resentment and burnout, driven by a societal ideal of good parenting rather than a balanced, authentic expression of love and care. This suppression of authenticity can lead to superficial connections where true intimacy, built on vulnerability and genuine self-expression, remains elusive. In more professional settings, the facade might manifest as the ideal employee who consistently works overtime, agrees to impossible deadlines, or never voices dissent, even when they know a project is flawed. This performance is often driven by a desire for promotions, fear of job loss, or a need to be seen as a team player, irrespective of the personal cost to their well-being or the integrity of their work. The individual becomes a chameleon, adapting their opinions and behaviors to fit the corporate culture, often at the expense of their unique contributions or ethical convictions. The fear of being perceived as difficult or uncooperative becomes a powerful motivator, leading to a pervasive sense of inauthenticity in the workplace. Perhaps most conspicuously, the facade thrives in the public sphere and digital culture. As previously noted, virtue signaling is a quintessential manifestation where individuals perform acts of moral righteousness, posting impassioned political statements, sharing emotionally charged content, or participating in performative activism, primarily to enhance their social image or demonstrate their alignment with a particular group, rather than necessarily engaging in meaningful action or deep reflection. This public performance can create an echo chamber of manufactured outrage and superficial solidarity, where the appearance of caring overshadows genuine empathy and sustained effort. The curated self presented online often bears little resemblance to the complex humans behind the screen, yet it is the image that commands attention and validation, even within religious and spiritual communities, where the pursuit of authentic virtue is ostensibly paramount. The facade can take root. The individual who meticulously adheres to every ritual, quotes scripture profusely, or publicly condemns perceived moral failings in others may be performing a role rather than embodying a genuine spiritual transformation. This can be a subtle form of spiritual bypassing where outward displays of piety are used to avoid confronting one's own internal struggles, doubts, or shadow aspects. The focus shifts from inner work to external performance, creating a chasm between the ideal of spiritual goodness and the reality of the individual's inner state. The Quran too warns against such hypocrisy, stating, "Woe to those who pray but are heedless of their prayer, those who make show of their deeds." Quran 107:4-6. As we unravel these intricate motivations and manifestations, a profound question emerges. What is the true, often hidden, or cost of sustaining this elaborate performance? The energy required to maintain a discrepancy between our inner and outer selves is immense, leading to a host of internal consequences that ripple through our psychological and spiritual well-being. It is to this profound inquiry into the hidden toll of the good person facade that we will turn our attention in the next chapter. We will explore the psychological burden, the spiritual stagnation, and the relational estrangement that inevitably arise when we prioritize appearance over authenticity. We have established that the good person facade is a deeply ingrained and multifaceted phenomenon, driven by both primal psychological needs and complex spiritual misinterpretations. We have traced its origins from the yearning for social acceptance to the ego's thirst for recognition, manifesting across personal, professional, and public spheres. But what is the true cost of this elaborate performance? What are the hidden burdens carried by those who meticulously maintain this virtuous exterior? And what are the broader implications for human connection and genuine spiritual evolution? In this chapter, we will delve into the profound and often devastating toll the facade exacts, examining its psychological burden, its hindrance to spiritual growth, and the relational estrangement it inevitably fosters. The psychological burden of maintaining the good person facade is immense, operating as a relentless drain on an individual's mental and emotional resources. At its core, the facade creates a persistent state of cognitive dissonance, a psychological discomfort arising from holding conflicting beliefs or performing actions that contradict one's true feelings or values. The individual knows, at some level, that their presented self is not their authentic self. This internal schism requires constant mental gymnastics to reconcile, leading to heightened anxiety, stress, and a pervasive sense of inauthenticity. The brain is continually engaged in a monitoring process, evaluating every word, gesture, and reaction to ensure it aligns with the carefully constructed persona. This sustained vigilance is exhausting, often manifesting as chronic fatigue, irritability, and a profound sense of emptiness, even when outwardly successful or praised. The performance anxiety inherent in daily interactions becomes a baseline state, making genuine relaxation and self-acceptance elusive. Furthermore, the facade necessitates significant emotional repression. To consistently present as good, individuals often feel compelled to suppress emotions deemed negative or undesirable, such as anger, frustration, sadness, envy, or even genuine disagreement. These emotions do not simply disappear, they are pushed inward, where they fester and can manifest in myriad unhealthy ways. Chronic repression can lead to a diminished capacity to feel any emotion deeply, including joy and love, leaving the individual feeling numb or disconnected from their inner world. This emotional unresponsiveness contributes to a profound loss of authentic self. Over time, the mask can become so convincingly integrated that the individual loses touch with who they truly are beneath the layers of performance. Their genuine desires, boundaries, values, and even their unique personality traits become obscured, replaced by the dictates of the facade. They may find themselves making choices that align with the good person image, rather than their true inclinations, leading to regret, resentment, and a deep-seated feeling of being a stranger to oneself. This constant self-betrayal is a fertile ground for the development of mental health challenges, including chronic anxiety, depression, burnout, and imposter syndrome, where individuals, despite outward success, are plagued by the fear of being exposed as a fraud. Beyond the psychological strain, the good person facade presents a significant impediment to spiritual stagnation. True spiritual growth, across virtually all traditions, demands authenticity, self-awareness, and a willingness to confront one's imperfections. The facade, however, is designed precisely to avoid this confrontation. If one always appears virtuous, there is no internal impetus to undertake the arduous work of genuine self-transformation. The external validation received for the facade can easily be mistaken for genuine spiritual progress, creating a dangerous illusion of piety. This leads to the superficiality of spiritual practice. Acts of charity, prayer, meditation, or adherence to religious rituals become performative acts, undertaken for the praise of others, or to reinforce one's self-image as a good or pious person, rather than as sincere expressions of devotion, compassion, or a genuine desire for inner change. We see echoes of this in Jesus' condemnation of the Pharisees, who do all their deeds to be seen by others, Matthew 23:5, and in the Quran's warnings against riya, where actions are motivated by outward display rather than sincere intention. This performative spirituality fosters a profound disconnection from inner wisdom or the divine. Authentic spiritual connection requires vulnerability, humility, and a direct engagement with one's inner landscape, including its shadow aspects. The facade, by its very nature, creates a barrier to this intimacy. The individual is so focused on managing external perceptions that they neglect the deeper internal work required for genuine spiritual experience. The ego, fed by the praise for its goodness, becomes inflated, further distancing the individual from the humility and self-effacement often seen as prerequisites for spiritual enlightenment. This can lead to the trap of self-righteousness, where the facade wearer, convinced of their own virtue, begins to judge others who appear less good, thereby undermining the very spiritual virtues of compassion, empathy, and unconditional love that they outwardly claim to embody. The spiritual journey becomes a competitive display rather than an internal pilgrimage. Perhaps the most heartbreaking consequence of the good person facade is the profound relational estrangement it engenders. Human beings are wired for connection, but genuine connection thrives on authenticity and vulnerability. The facade, by definition, prevents this. Individuals operating under a facade can only form superficial connections, as others are relating to the persona, not the real person. This leads to a deep and pervasive sense of loneliness, even when surrounded by friends, family, or colleagues. The fear of exposure, the constant anxiety that the mask might slip, makes true intimacy impossible. The individual cannot afford to be truly vulnerable, to share their doubts, fears, or imperfections, because doing so would risk shattering the carefully constructed image. This creates an emotional chasm between the self and others, fostering a perpetual sense of being misunderstood and unseen. Moreover, the suppressed needs and emotions inherent in maintaining the facade often manifest as resentment and passive aggression within relationships. The individual may feel taken advantage of, unappreciated or unseen, but cannot express these feelings directly because it would contradict their good image. This resentment can simmer beneath the surface, occasionally erupting in unexpected outbursts, subtle sabotage, or a general withdrawal of affection. Ultimately, when the facade is eventually penetrated or collapses, it leads to a devastating erosion of trust. Whether in personal relationships or public life, the revelation that a person's presented self was a deception can cause irreparable damage. The fall from grace is often more severe precisely because of the perceived hypocrisy, leaving a trail of broken trust and disillusioned individuals. The societal ramifications are equally significant, as a widespread prevalence of facades erodes collective trust, making genuine community, collaboration, and empathy increasingly difficult to achieve. When everyone is performing, who can truly be trusted? The cost of the good person facade is thus far more profound than mere inconvenience. It is a multi-layered tax on the individual's psychological well-being, spiritual integrity, and capacity for authentic human connection. It promises acceptance and esteem, but delivers anxiety, emptiness, and isolation. It offers the illusion of virtue, but obstructs the path to genuine goodness. We are left with the undeniable truth that the pursuit of perceived perfection through performance often leads to a deeper, more insidious form of suffering. The critical question, then, becomes how we might begin to dismantle these pervasive facades, both within ourselves and in our collective consciousness, to reclaim the authenticity that is vital for true flourishing. In our subsequent explorations, we will turn our attention to the pathways for recognizing and ultimately transcending this performative existence, moving towards a more integrated and genuinely virtuous self. The profound costs of maintaining the good person facade are clear: anxiety, emptiness, isolation, and a fundamental obstruction to genuine personal and spiritual flourishing. We have seen how this elaborate performance saps our vitality, distorts our relationships, and prevents us from knowing our authentic selves. The crucial question that emerges from this understanding is not merely why we wear these masks, but how we might begin to remove them. The path to authenticity, to a life lived with integrity and true connection, begins with a single daunting yet utterly necessary step: recognition. In this chapter, we will delve into the intricate process of unmasking the performance. We will explore the subtle internal whispers and the more overt external signals that indicate the presence of a facade, both within ourselves and in the world around us. This journey of recognition is not an act of judgment, but rather an invitation to honest self-assessment, a courageous gaze into the mirrors of our own making. It is the foundational step in dismantling the structures of pretense that have kept us from true self-knowledge and genuine connection. The good person facade often operates below the threshold of conscious awareness, a well-rehearsed script that becomes second nature. Yet, its maintenance exacts a heavy internal toll, leaving behind subtle but persistent indicators that something is amiss. One of the most pervasive of these is cognitive dissonance. The psychological discomfort experienced when holding conflicting beliefs, values, or attitudes, or when one's actions contradict one's beliefs. For those upholding a facade, this manifests as a nagging unease, a persistent feeling that something is off between their internal experience and their external presentation. We might find ourselves feeling depleted and resentful after performing an act of selflessness that was driven more by obligation or the desire for praise than by genuine generosity. The act itself might seem virtuous, but the internal aftermath is one of exhaustion, not fulfillment. Hand in hand with cognitive dissonance often comes emotional repression. The good person persona, by its very nature, often demands the suppression of emotions deemed undesirable or bad: anger, sadness, fear, or even legitimate frustration. We learn to say, "I'm fine," even when our internal world is in turmoil, because expressing vulnerability or negative emotions might shatter the carefully constructed image of composure and benevolence. This constant stifling of authentic emotional responses leads to a disconnection from our inner landscape, preventing genuine processing and healing. Over time, this repression can manifest as chronic anxiety, unexplained physical ailments, or a pervasive sense of emotional numbness. Another telltale sign is the relentless presence of an inner critic and an accompanying drive for perfectionism. The facade is inherently fragile, always susceptible to exposure. To protect it, we often develop an internalized voice that demands flawless performance, an unwavering adherence to an impossible ideal of goodness. This voice constantly scrutinizes our every thought, word, and deed, ensuring they align with the projected image. The fear of making mistakes becomes overwhelming, not because of the mistake itself, but because it threatens to reveal the imperfect self lurking beneath the facade. This internal pressure creates immense anxiety and exhaustion, as the psychological energy required to maintain such a flawless front is astronomical. It's like constantly performing on a stage, never allowing ourselves to relax and simply be. Ultimately, this prolonged state of pretense leads to a profound loss of authentic self. We begin to lose touch with who we truly are, what genuinely moves us, and what our core values entail, leaving us with an existential emptiness beneath the polished veneer. While the internal indicators whisper to our conscience, the good person facade also casts observable shadows in our external behavior, often manifesting in patterns that, upon closer inspection, reveal their performative nature. One common manifestation is over-performance and people-pleasing. The individual driven by the facade often finds it nearly impossible to say no, constantly taking on extra responsibilities, volunteering for every task, or agreeing to requests even when overwhelmed. Their actions are less about genuine capacity or desire, and more about securing external validation, praise, or avoiding potential disapproval. We might observe the colleague who consistently works late, not out of passion for the project, but from a deep-seated need to be perceived as indispensable and dedicated, even at the cost of their own well-being. When the facade is threatened, even slightly, individuals often exhibit heightened defensiveness and sensitivity to criticism. A minor critique, a suggestion for improvement, or even a perceived slight can trigger disproportionately strong negative reactions: anger, indignation, or withdrawal. This is because the criticism is not merely about the action, but about the identity itself. The carefully constructed image of goodness is under attack, and the ego reacts fiercely to protect its stronghold. The perceived flaw in the action translates into a fundamental flaw in the dear person, a direct challenge to the self-concept as a good person. Another revealing external indicator is inconsistency in behavior. The individual may present different personas to different audiences, a charming and benevolent public self, contrasting sharply with a dismissive or critical private self. This discrepancy between the public and private self is a hallmark of the facade, as the good person is a role played for specific audiences and contexts, rather than an integrated expression of one's whole being. We might observe the community leader lauded for their philanthropy, who treats their family with indifference or contempt behind closed doors. Perhaps most prevalent in our digital age is virtue signaling and performative altruism. These are actions primarily aimed at being seen as good, rather than being driven by genuine empathy or a desire for impact. Social media feeds are rife with examples: public declarations of moral superiority, grand statements about social justice without accompanying personal action, or publicizing charitable acts for applause rather than impact. The focus shifts from the deed to the perceptions of the deed. This performative aspect is not limited to online spaces. It manifests in public donations that are widely publicized, or in volunteering efforts undertaken primarily for resume building or social credit. Finally, individuals deeply entrenched in a facade often engage in woke projection and judgment of others. They may harshly criticize or condemn others for perceived flaws that unconsciously mirror their own suppressed or disowned aspects. By focusing on the badness of others, they reinforce their own self-perception as good and deflect attention from their internal inconsistencies. This judgmental stance serves as a defense mechanism, a way to shore up their own fragile sense of virtue by contrasting it with the perceived failings of others. If the signs of the facade are so prevalent, why is recognition so challenging? The answer lies in the deep-seated psychological and societal forces that conspire to keep us cloaked in our pretense. Foremost among these is ego resistance. The ego, our constructed sense of self, is fiercely protective of the identity it has built. The good person persona, however painful its maintenance, offers a sense of stability, acceptance, and often superiority. To acknowledge the facade is to threaten this established self-concept, raising the terrifying question, who will I be without this mask? The comfort of the familiar persona, even if it brings suffering, often outweighs the perceived risk of authenticity. Furthermore, societal reinforcement actively encourages and rewards the maintenance of the facade. From childhood, we are conditioned to seek external praise and avoid disapproval. Our cultures often celebrate outward displays of virtue, conferring status, acceptance, and opportunities upon those who skillfully perform goodness. In a world obsessed with appearances, going against the grain, embracing vulnerability, and admitting imperfection can feel like an act of rebellion, inviting potential rejection and judgment. The fear of being unloved or unacceptable if our true selves were revealed is a potent deterrent, rooted in our fundamental human need for belonging. Adding to this complexity is the often unconscious nature of the facade. Many aspects of our performative behavior are deeply ingrained habits operating below conscious awareness. We may genuinely believe we are acting from pure motives even when subtle undercurrents of ego or fear are at play. This unconsciousness makes self-recognition a particularly arduous task, requiring a dedicated effort to bring hidden motivations into the light. Given the formidable barriers to recognition, what tools can we employ to cultivate the necessary awareness? The journey begins with practices that foster introspection and honest self-observation. Mindfulness and self-reflection are paramount. By practicing presence, observing our thoughts, feelings, and motivations without immediate judgment, We create the space to notice the discrepancies between our internal experience and our external actions. Journaling can be a powerful ally here, allowing us to record and analyze patterns of behavior and emotional reactions. Regular meditation can train our minds to be more attuned to our inner landscape, making the subtle whispers of dissonance more audible. Another crucial tool is seeking honest feedback from trusted sources. This requires immense vulnerability, but close friends, family members, or mentors who genuinely care for us can offer gentle, truthful observations that we might otherwise miss. It's essential that these relationships are built on psychological safety, where feedback is offered with compassion and received with an open heart rather than defensiveness. We must also learn to examine our emotional reactions, particularly those that seem disproportionate to the situation. Why does minor critique trigger such intense anger? Why does an act of service leave us feeling resentful instead of fulfilled? These heightened emotional responses are often signals that a facade has been challenged, or that our actions are out of alignment with our true selves. Perhaps the most direct path to unmasking is to consistently ask ourselves, why am I doing this? This simple question helps us distinguish between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Are we engaging in an act of kindness because we genuinely care, intrinsic, or because we desire praise, social credit, or to avoid criticism, extrinsic? Are we pursuing a goal because it aligns with our deepest values, or because it will impress others? This relentless questioning, applied with a spirit of curiosity rather than self-condemnation, gradually reveals the true drivers behind our actions. Spiritually, various traditions offer powerful mirrors for self-reflection. Christianity, for instance, frequently warns against outward displays of piety without corresponding inner transformation. Jesus often condemned the Pharisees for their performative righteousness, stating, "Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them, for then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven." Matthew chapter 6:1. This calls us to examine the heart's true intent behind our acts of charity, prayer, or fasting. In Buddhism, the concept of anatta, non-self, profoundly challenges the very notion of a fixed, performative self, urging us to observe our attachment to any good identity, the desire for praise, and the aversion to blame. Similarly, Sufism highlights riya, ostentation, not just in grand gestures, but in the subtle internal movements of the heart seeking approval, emphasizing ikhlas, sincerity, as the antidote, a state of pure intention free from any desire for worldly recognition. Recognition is not a singular event, but an ongoing process, a continuous peeling back of layers. The initial act of courage is simply to acknowledge the possibility of a facade within ourselves. It is to admit, perhaps for the first time, that our presentations of goodness might not always align with our deepest truths. This acknowledgement is the first crack in the mask, allowing a sliver of light to penetrate. The next courageous step is to allow for vulnerability and imperfection, even in small, controlled doses. This might mean admitting a mistake, expressing a genuine emotion, or saying no to a request that would have previously been met with an automatic yes. Each small act of authenticity chips away at the facade, demonstrating to ourselves that the world does not in fact collapse when we are less than perfect. The paradox of genuine goodness is that it rarely emerges from flawless performance, but rather from humble self-awareness, a willingness to confront our imperfections, and a courageous commitment to growth. As we begin to recognize the intricate architecture of our own good person facade, we stand at the precipice of a profound transformation. This initial awareness, however uncomfortable, is the indispensable gateway to reclaiming our authentic selves and fostering true flourishing. The work of recognition is challenging, but it is the essential precursor to the more active dismantling and rebuilding that lies ahead. In the chapters to come, we will explore the practical steps of how to gently yet firmly shed these masks and embrace the liberating power of genuine integrity. Chapter 4 laid the groundwork, urging us to recognize the subtle, often unconscious presence of the good person facade within ourselves. We explored the internal whispers of cognitive dissonance and the external tells of performative virtue. This initial act of awareness, though challenging, is merely the opening of the curtain. True transformation, however, demands more than recognition. It requires a courageous, deliberate, and sustained effort to dismantle the masks we have so painstakingly constructed. This chapter will guide us through the practical, psychological, and spiritual steps necessary to shed the facade and embark on the arduous yet ultimately liberating journey toward authentic selfhood. The process of dismantling is not a single event but a dynamic, iterative unfolding often marked by discomfort, resistance, and occasional setbacks. It is an excavation of the self, a gentle yet firm unearthing of the genuine person beneath layers of social conditioning, fear, and egoic aspiration. We will begin by revisiting the fundamental drivers of the facade, not to dwell in self-recrimination, but to understand the roots of our protective mechanisms. This understanding forms the bedrock upon which we can build new, healthier patterns of being. The psychological dimension of dismantling the facade centers on recalibrating our internal compass away from external validation and toward an intrinsic sense of worth. Cultivating self-compassion. Perhaps the most crucial first step in active dismantling is the embrace of self-compassion. For years, we may have judged our true selves as not good enough, leading us to don the facade. Now, as we begin to expose our imperfections, the inner critic can become particularly harsh. Self-compassion involves treating ourselves with the same kindness, understanding, and acceptance we would offer a dear friend facing similar struggles. It means acknowledging our pain, our fears, and our perceived shortcomings without judgment, recognizing that these are universal human experiences. Practices like mindful self-compassion meditations, journaling about self-kindness, and consciously reframing self-critical thoughts can be profoundly transformative. We learn that our worth is inherent, not contingent upon flawless performance or the approval of others. Challenging core beliefs. The facade is often built upon deeply ingrained, unexamined core beliefs about ourselves and the world. These might include, I must be perfect to be loved. My value depends on what I do for others. Showing weakness makes me vulnerable to rejection, or negative emotions are unacceptable. To dismantle the facade, we must identify these beliefs and rigorously question their validity. Are they truly serving us? Do they reflect reality, or are they relics of past experiences or societal conditioning? Cognitive behavioral therapy (CBT) techniques, such as thought records and cognitive restructuring, can be invaluable here, helping us to identify distorted thinking patterns and replace them with more balanced, realistic perspectives. We begin to understand that our imperfections do not diminish our worth. They make us human. Establishing healthy boundaries, significant manifestation of the good person facade, is the inability to set and maintain healthy boundaries. Fearing disapproval or appearing selfish, individuals often overextend themselves, say yes when they mean no, and allow others to infringe upon their time, energy, and emotional well-being. Dismantling this aspect requires learning to articulate our needs and limits clearly and respectfully. This is not an act of selfishness, but an act of self-preservation and a prerequisite for genuine connection. When we set boundaries, we teach others how to treat us, and we create space for our authentic selves to thrive. This practice often involves initial discomfort and guilt, but with persistence, it leads to increased self-respect and more balanced relationships. Developing emotional literacy and expression. The facade frequently involves the suppression of unacceptable emotions, anger, sadness, fear, frustration, because they contradict the image of the perpetually good or happy person. This emotional repression is a heavy burden, leading to anxiety, depression, and a disconnect from our inner guidance system. To dismantle this, we must cultivate emotional literacy. The ability to identify, understand, and label our emotions accurately. Subsequently, we must learn to express these emotions in healthy, constructive ways. This might involve journaling, talking to trusted friends or therapists, or engaging in creative outlets. We recognize that all emotions are valid messengers, providing crucial information about our internal state and our experiences, and that authentic expression fosters genuine connection rather than alienating others. Practicing vulnerability. The ultimate antithesis to the facade is vulnerability. The facade is a shield designed to protect us from perceived judgment or harm. Vulnerability, conversely, is the courageous act of allowing ourselves to be seen, truly seen, with our imperfections, doubts, and fears. This is not about oversharing or self-pity, but about authentic self-disclosure in appropriate contexts. We can begin by practicing vulnerability with trusted individuals, a close friend, a family member, a therapist, gradually revealing aspects of ourselves we previously kept hidden. Each small act of vulnerability, when met with acceptance, reinforces the safety of authenticity and weakens the hold of the facade. It teaches us that our imperfections are not liabilities, but gateways to deeper connection. Decentering external validation. The psychological engine of the facade is often a profound need for external validation. We perform goodness to gain approval, praise, or acceptance. Dismantling this requires a conscious shift from seeking external affirmation to cultivating internal validation. This involves developing a strong sense of self-worth that is independent of others' opinions. Mindfulness practices help us observe the urge for external praise without acting on it. Affirmations of self-worth, focusing on our intrinsic qualities rather than achievements or social standing, can also support this shift. We learn to trust our own judgment, value our own inner compass, and find contentment in our authentic being, irrespective of how others perceive us. From a spiritual perspective, dismantling the facade involves a profound reorientation from ego-driven performance to genuine inner transformation. Re-evaluating spiritual understanding. Many spiritual facades are built upon a misinterpretation or superficial engagement with spiritual teachings. We may have adopted rituals, dogma, or practices without truly integrating their underlying principles of love, compassion, and humility. Dismantling requires a critical and honest re-evaluation of our spiritual understanding. Are we practicing out of genuine devotion and a desire for inner transformation, or out of a need to appear pious, righteous, or enlightened to others or even to ourselves? This introspection encourages us to delve deeper into the essence of our chosen spiritual path, seeking direct experience and personal truth over rote adherence or performative displays. Cultivating inner virtue and sincerity, ikhlas. The spiritual facade prioritizes the outward show of virtue. The path to dismantling flips this emphasis, focusing on the cultivation of inner virtue and sincerity. In Islam, this is encapsulated by the concept of ikhlas, meaning purity of intention, performing acts solely for the sake of God, without seeking human praise or recognition. In Buddhist traditions, practices like metta, loving kindness, meditation cultivate genuine compassion that radiates from within, rather than being performed. For Christians, the Sermon on the Mount emphasizes inner righteousness over outward displays of piety. This shift involves consistently asking, what is my true motivation for this action? If the answer is external validation or egoic aggrandizement, we pause, recenter, and attempt to act from a place of genuine love, compassion, or devotion, even if it goes unnoticed. Surrender and detachment from ego. The ego is the architect and primary beneficiary of the good person facade. It thrives on recognition, specialness, and the illusion of control, and spiritual dismantling, therefore, necessitates a process of surrender and detachment from the ego's grip. This does not mean annihilating the self, but rather recognizing the ego's limited and often deceptive nature. Practices like meditation, contemplative prayer, and self-inquiry help us to observe the ego's desires and narratives without identifying with them. We gradually learn to distinguish the voice of our authentic self, often quiet, wise, and compassionate, from the clamoring demands of the ego, often loud, anxious, and self-serving. As we loosen the ego's hold, the need for the facade naturally diminishes. Service without expectation. One powerful spiritual practice for dismantling the facade is service without expectation of reward or recognition. Engaging in acts of kindness, charity, or community support purely for the benefit of others, without publicizing it or seeking praise, directly challenges the ego's need for validation. This practice helps to purify intentions and cultivate a genuine spirit of altruism. It allows us to experience the intrinsic joy of giving, which is a far more fulfilling and sustainable source of well-being than any external accolade. The journey of dismantling the facade manifests concretely in how we interact with the world and ourselves. Authentic communication. We transition from carefully curated speech designed to impress or appease to authentic communication. This means speaking our truth kindly but firmly, expressing our opinions respectfully, and engaging in honest dialogue even when it's uncomfortable. It also involves active listening, truly hearing others without immediately formulating a response that maintains our good image. We learn to say "I don't know" when we don't, and "I made a mistake" when we do. Genuine relationships. As the facade crumbles, our relationships deepen. We move away from superficial connections based on mutual performance to genuine relationships, built on trust, mutual respect, and shared vulnerability. We allow ourselves to be seen by others, and in turn, we create a safe space for them to be truly themselves. This may mean some relationships shift or even end if they were solely predicated on the facade, but it opens the door for more profound and fulfilling connections. Integrity in professional settings. In professional life, dismantling the facade means prioritizing integrity over impressiveness. We focus on contributing authentically, admitting limitations when necessary, and collaborating genuinely rather than competing for recognition or performing busyness. It means aligning our actions with our values, even when it's not the easiest or most popular path. Mindful digital presence. given the pervasive nature of digital culture, dismantling the facade also extends to our online lives. This involves a more mindful digital presence, where we resist the urge for virtue signaling or performative altruism. We share authentically, engage thoughtfully, and prioritize genuine connection over curated self-promotion. We recognize that true impact often happens offline, and that our worth is not measured by likes or followers. The path to authentic selfhood is not without its trials. Resistance will inevitably arise, both from within and from without. Internal resistance. Our ego, accustomed to the safety and rewards of the facade, will resist its dismantling. We may experience fear of rejection, anxiety about being found out, or guilt for no longer being good enough in the old ways. It is crucial to meet this resistance with self-compassion and persistence, reminding ourselves of the profound freedom that lies beyond these fears. External resistance. Others, especially those who benefited from our facade, e.g. those we always pleased, those who relied on our overgiving, may react negatively to our newfound authenticity. They might perceive our boundaries as selfishness, or our honesty as unkindness. This can be painful, but it is also a powerful test and affirmation of our commitment to ourselves. We must learn to navigate these reactions with grace, maintaining our boundaries while understanding that others' discomfort is not our responsibility to fix. The non-linear journey. The journey of dismantling is rarely a straight line. There will be moments of triumph and moments when we slip back into old patterns. We may find ourselves unconsciously donning a mask in a moment of stress or insecurity. It is essential to approach these setbacks not as failures but as opportunities for learning and further growth. Each stumble offers insight into the remaining areas where the facade still holds sway, inviting deeper compassion and continued effort. The courage to dismantle the good person facade ultimately leads to a profound sense of liberation, inner peace, and genuine connection. It is the freedom to exist fully, to embrace our whole selves, strengths and weaknesses, light and shadow, without the exhausting burden of pretense. It is the peace that comes from inner congruence, where our internal world aligns with our external expression. And it is the joy of authentic relationships, where we are loved not for who we pretend to be, but for who we truly are. This journey is an invitation to reclaim our power, to live with integrity, and to experience the deep, unshakable satisfaction of being genuinely, imperfectly, wonderfully ourselves. We move from performing goodness to embodying it, not for external applause, but for the inherent truth and beauty of our own being. Having charted the intricate pathways to dismantle the good person facade, from cultivating self-compassion to surrendering the ego, we now stand at a pivotal juncture. The act of tearing down the facade is not an end in itself, but rather a profound beginning, an initiation into a new way of being. This chapter invites us to explore the landscape that emerges when the performative self recedes, revealing the contours of true goodness. What does life look like when authenticity becomes our guiding principle? What challenges and profound rewards await us on this less travelled path, and how do we navigate a world still largely captivated by appearances? The journey beyond the facade is rarely a seamless transition into immediate serenity. Instead, it often begins with a period of discomfort and resistance, both internal and external. Internally, the ego, accustomed to its elaborate protective mechanisms and the familiar comforts of external validation, does not relinquish its hold easily. We may experience a lingering fear of exposure, a vulnerability that feels raw and unfamiliar. The absence of the facade can initially feel like the loss of a crucial coping mechanism, leaving us feeling exposed and uncertain, much like shedding a protective shell that, while heavy, offered a perceived sense of security. This psychological void can manifest as anxiety, a sense of aimlessness, or even a nostalgic pull towards the predictability of the old performance. We might question if we are truly good enough without the curated image, grappling with the very core beliefs we work to challenge in Chapter 5. Externally, the world too may react to our newfound authenticity with a mixture of confusion, discomfort, or even outright rejection. Those who knew us primarily through our facade might struggle to reconcile our authentic self with the image they had constructed. A parent who always expected compliant obedience might find our new boundaries challenging. A colleague who benefited from our people-pleasing tendencies might resent our assertiveness. We may encounter misunderstanding, criticism, or the unsettling experience of losing connections that were built on the shaky ground of our performance. This resistance, while painful, serves as a crucial test, solidifying our commitment to authenticity. It forces us to confront whether our desire for true goodness is strong enough to withstand the discomfort of external disapproval, prompting us to anchor our self-worth internally rather than in the shifting sands of others' opinions. As we navigate this initial turbulence, we begin to redefine goodness itself, shifting from performance to presence. The facade taught us that goodness was an external achievement, a series of actions performed for an audience. Beyond it, we discover that true goodness is an intrinsic state, an emanation of our deepest self, rooted in integrity, compassion, and a genuine desire to contribute. It is not about appearing good, but about being good, aligning our intentions, words, and actions in a harmonious whole. This shift moves us from extrinsic motivation, acting for reward, praise, or to avoid punishment, to intrinsic motivation, acting from a place of genuine care, empathy, and a felt sense of interconnectedness. Consider the parent who once volunteered at school out of a need to be seen as involved and selfless. Beyond the facade, that same parent might volunteer less frequently, but when they do, their actions are imbued with a genuine joy for contribution, a sincere connection with the children, and an absence of any expectation of recognition. The quiet power of this authentic action far outweighs the loud spectacle of performative virtue. Spiritually, this aligns with the concept of ikhlas in Islamic traditions, emphasizing sincere devotion and action purely for the sake of the divine, free from any desire for worldly praise or recognition. It echoes the Buddhist ideal of soul non-attachment to outcomes, where actions arise from compassion rather than egoic clinging to results. True goodness, then, is not measured by the quantity of our good deeds, but by the purity of the intention behind them. It manifests as a quiet dignity, a humble service, and an unwavering commitment to ethical conduct even when no one is watching. This redefinition of goodness has a profoundly transformative power in relationships. When we shed the facade, we open ourselves to genuine intimacy and trust. Relationships built on performance are inherently superficial. They are connections between carefully constructed images, not between authentic selves. By daring to be vulnerable and real, we invite others to do the same. This can deepen existing relationships, moving them beyond polite exchanges and shared activities to spaces of profound understanding, empathy, and mutual support. We learn to communicate our needs, boundaries, and true feelings with honesty, even if it might risk temporary discomfort or conflict. This courage, while challenging, is the bedrock of true connection. Moreover, living authentically acts as a powerful filter. We begin to attract new relationships that resonate with our true self, people who value our integrity and vulnerability. Conversely, relationships that thrived on our previous performance may naturally fall away, a process that can be painful but ultimately liberating. The friend who only valued us for our constant agreement might drift away, making space for a friend who cherishes our independent thought and honest feedback. The colleague who exploited our people-pleasing tendencies might find our new assertiveness off-putting. While the loss of these connections can sting, it ultimately frees us from the emotional labor of maintaining inauthentic bonds, allowing us to invest our energy in relationships that nourish and uplift our true self. The gift of being truly seen and seeing others truly is one of the most profound rewards of shedding the facade, fostering a sense of belonging that is deeply rooted and unconditionally accepting. Beyond our personal spheres, authenticity has significant societal and ethical implications. In professional settings, individuals who have dismantled their facades become beacons of integrity. They lead with transparency, make ethical decisions not out of fear of repercussions but out of a genuine commitment to values, and foster environments where honest feedback and genuine collaboration thrive. They are not afraid to admit mistakes, to ask for help, or to challenge unjust systems, precisely because their self-worth is not tied to an infallible image. This kind of leadership inspires trust and cultivates a culture of psychological safety, where others feel empowered to bring their whole selves to their work. In the broader public discourse, authentic individuals contribute genuine perspectives rather than echoing popular opinions for social currency. They engage in constructive dialogue, willing to listen and learn, and courageous enough to speak their truth even when it is unpopular. They resist the urge to virtue signal, preferring to embody their values through consistent action rather than performative declarations. This quiet revolution of everyday integrity has the potential to slowly but surely challenge societal norms that perpetuate facades, encouraging a collective shift towards greater honesty, empathy, and genuine connection. Imagine a political landscape where leaders are driven by sincere service rather than image management, or a social media environment where vulnerability is celebrated over curated perfection. The ripple effects of individual authenticity can be profound, fostering a more humane, trustworthy, and genuinely compassionate society. Yet, sustaining the authentic self is an ongoing practice, not a destination. The world is constantly inviting us back into performance with its subtle cues and overt pressures. We will inevitably encounter moments where the old urges resurface. The desire for approval, the fear of judgment, the temptation to smooth over conflict with a convenient untruth. Authenticity, therefore, requires continuous self-awareness, a vigilant commitment to mindfulness, and an unwavering dedication to self-compassion. We must regularly check in with ourselves. Are our internal experiences aligning with our external expressions? Are we acting from a place of genuine intention or subtle egoic motivation? When we inevitably slip, as all humans do, the key is not self-condemnation but gentle correction. Rather than castigating ourselves for a moment of people-pleasing or a lapse into superficiality, we can observe the behavior with curiosity, understand its triggers, and gently guide ourselves back to our authentic center. This ongoing process of self-reflection and realignment is bolstered by supportive communities and practices, whether it be regular meditation, journaling, engaging in honest conversations with trusted friends, or seeking guidance from spiritual mentors. These anchors help us remain grounded in our true self amidst the currents of external expectation. In conclusion, the journey beyond the good person facade is a profound liberation, a return to our inherent goodness. It promises not an easy path, but one rich with genuine connection, inner peace, and a profound sense of integrity. We shed the heavy burden of performance to embrace the lightness of being truly ourselves. This is where true psychological well-being and spiritual flourishing reside, not in the flawless image we project, but in the courageous, imperfect, and deeply human truth of who we are. It is a continuous invitation to live with an open heart, an honest voice, and an unwavering commitment to the quiet, powerful work of authentic presence, transforming not only ourselves but also the world around us. In Chapter 6, we ventured into the liberating expanse beyond the good person facade, acknowledging the initial discomfort and resistance that inevitably accompany the shedding of an old skin. We recognize that true goodness emerges not from performance but from an intrinsic presence, fostering genuine relationships and integrity across all spheres of life. Crucially, we concluded that sustaining this authentic self is not a destination reached but an ongoing practice, a continuous process of self-awareness, self-compassion, and gentle correction. Now we turn our attention to the deeper implications of this journey, exploring what it truly means to maintain such a profound alignment in a world still largely conditioned by the very facades we seek to dismantle. How do we navigate the persistent currents of societal expectation? And what is the broader impact of sustained individual authenticity on the collective human experience? The dynamic nature of authenticity, a lifelong pilgrimage. Authenticity, we contend, is not a static state but a dynamic, ever-evolving process, much like a river constantly shaping its banks. It is not a fixed identity we discover once and for all, but rather a continuous unfolding of our deepest self in response to the myriad experiences of life. As we grow, learn, and encounter new challenges, our understanding of who we authentically are deepens and enhances. This means that the practice of authenticity requires more than just an initial dismantling of the facade. It demands ongoing vigilance, introspection, and a willingness to reevaluate our motivations, beliefs, and behaviors. The muscle of authenticity, like any other, needs regular exercise to remain strong and responsive. This dynamic nature necessitates a persistent engagement with our inner landscape. We must continually ask ourselves, are my actions still aligned with my core values, or am I subtly slipping back into old patterns of seeking external validation? Am I truly listening to my inner wisdom, or am I allowing fear of judgment to dictate my choices? New situations inevitably present new triggers, new opportunities for the ego to reassert its desire for approval, or for societal pressures to subtly nudge us back towards conformity. Recognizing these nascent pulls and consciously choosing the path of authenticity, even when uncomfortable, is the essence of this ongoing pilgrimage. It is a commitment to a path of growth, where each stumble is an opportunity for deeper understanding, and each moment of alignment reinforces our commitment to genuine self-expression. Cultivating resilience in an inauthentic world. The journey towards sustained authenticity unfolds within a society still heavily invested in appearances. Digital culture, professional hierarchies, and even personal relationships often inadvertently reinforce the very behaviors associated with the good person facade. To maintain our authentic footing in such an environment requires a robust cultivation of resilience. The psychological and spiritual capacity to adapt and thrive in the face of adversity, particularly the adversity of external pressures to conform. One crucial aspect of this resilience is the ability to set and maintain healthy boundaries. This involves consciously deciding what we will and will not allow into our inner space, protecting our energy from draining interactions, and refusing to participate in conversations or activities that compromise our integrity. It means saying no when our authentic self would prefer to, even if it might disappoint others or risk social disapproval. Furthermore, cultivating resilience involves a deliberate shift from external validation to inner validation. We learn to trust our own internal compass, deriving our sense of worth from our inherent being rather than from the applause or approval of others. This is a profound liberation, as it frees us from the constant pursuit of external metrics of goodness and allows us to rest in the innate sufficiency of our true selves. Finding and nurturing authentic communities and support systems is another vital component. Surrounding ourselves with individuals who value honesty, vulnerability, and genuine connection, who see beyond the masks and encourage our true selves, provides a powerful buffer against the pressures of an inauthentic world. These relationships become safe harbors where we can practice vulnerability without fear of judgment, receive honest feedback, and be reminded of our inherent worth when doubts arise. Such communities are not merely social groups, they are crucibles for collective growth and mutual affirmation on the path of authenticity. The transformative power of compassion for self and others. As we deepen our understanding of the good person facade within ourselves, its motivations, its costs, and the arduous process of dismantling it, a profound shift occurs in our capacity for compassion. This journey fundamentally teaches us empathy, first for ourselves, and then, inevitably, for others. Self-compassion, as we have explored, is the bedrock of sustained authenticity. It involves treating ourselves with the same kindness, care, and understanding we would offer a good friend, especially when we stumble, make mistakes, or feel the pull of old patterns. It is the gentle recognition that the facade was often born of a genuine human need for safety and belonging, rather than malice. This non-judgmental acceptance of our own imperfections and past behaviors is essential for continuous growth, preventing the cycle of self-condemnation that can easily lead us back into hiding behind a persona. When we extend compassion to our former facade-driven selves, we integrate those parts of our experience rather than repudiate them, fostering a more whole and resilient self. This cultivated self-compassion naturally extends outward, transforming our perception of others. When we observe behaviors in others that we recognize as manifestations of the good person facade, the overt virtue signaling, the subtle manipulation for approval, the performative acts of kindness, our initial reaction shifts from judgment to understanding. We begin to see these actions not as inherent flaws, but as expressions of their own unmet needs, their fears of rejection, or their own conditioning. We understand that they too are likely navigating their own struggles with authenticity, trapped by the same societal pressures and inner insecurities that once ensnared us. This empathetic perspective fosters genuine connection rather than separation. Instead of reinforcing the cycle of judgment and performance, our compassionate understanding creates an opening for true interaction. It allows us to hold space for others' imperfections without condoning harmful behavior, and to model authenticity without demanding it from them. In doing so, we become agents of a subtle but powerful shift, inviting others through our presence to explore their own authenticity without explicit pressure. This is not about fixing others, but about contributing to an atmosphere where authenticity is increasingly valued and safe. Authenticity as a catalyst for collective change. The individual journey towards sustained authenticity is far from an isolated endeavor. It possesses a profound ripple effect, acting as a powerful catalyst for collective change. When individuals consistently choose authenticity over performance, they not only transform their own lives, but also subtly, yet powerfully reshape the social fabric around them. In her personal relationships, sustained authenticity fosters deeper intimacy and trust. When we show up as our true selves, imperfections and all, we invite others to do the same. This creates a virtuous cycle of vulnerability and genuine connection, moving relationships beyond superficial pleasantries and into realms of true understanding and mutual support. The fear of judgment dissipates, replaced by the comfort of being truly seen and accepted. In professional settings, authenticity cultivates environments of integrity, psychological safety, and innovation. Leaders who are genuinely authentic inspire trust and loyalty, fostering teams where open communication, constructive feedback, and creative problem-solving can flourish. When individuals feel safe to be themselves, to voice dissenting opinions, and to admit mistakes without fear of reprisal, organizations become more adaptable, ethical, and effective. The energy previously expended on impression management is redirected towards meaningful work and genuine collaboration. On a broader societal scale, particularly within public discourse and digital culture, sustained authenticity begins to challenge the very foundations of performative virtue signaling and superficial engagement. As more individuals prioritize genuine expression and thoughtful contribution over curated images and facile pronouncements, the collective appetite for inauthenticity may gradually diminish. The presence of authentic voices creates a counter-narrative exposing the hollowness of the facade and inspiring a re-evaluation of what constitutes true influence and leadership. This shift can contribute to a more honest, transparent, and ultimately more just society, where actions speak louder than carefully crafted words and integrity is valued above mere popularity. Embracing imperfection and the ongoing journey. It is imperative to acknowledge that the path of sustained authenticity is not linear, nor is it free from setbacks. We are human, and the deeply ingrained habits of the ego, coupled with pervasive societal conditioning, mean that we will inevitably stumble. There will be moments when fear of judgment resurfaces, when the desire for approval feels overwhelming, or when we inadvertently slip back into old patterns of performing for others. These moments are not failures, they are integral parts of the learning process. The key lies not in striving for an impossible perfection, but in cultivating gentle self-correction. When we recognize that we have momentarily lost our authentic footing, the practice is to observe without harsh judgment, understand the underlying trigger, and gently guide ourselves back to alignment. This requires self-awareness, but also a profound capacity for self-forgiveness. Just as a child learning to walk will fall many times before mastering the skill, so too will we waver on our journey towards sustained authenticity. Each misstep offers valuable data, revealing areas where our inner work needs further attention, or where our boundaries need strengthening. Ultimately, sustained authenticity is a lifelong pilgrimage, a continuous process of becoming. It is the journey of shedding layers, embracing vulnerability, and living in ever-increasing alignment with our true essence. The liberation promised in Chapter 6, inner peace, a genuine connection, and true flourishing, is not a static reward waiting at the end, but a lived experience that deepens with each conscious choice towards authenticity. It is the profound freedom of simply being, unburdened by the weight of expectations, and wholeheartedly embracing the beautiful, complex, and imperfect truth of who we are. This ongoing practice, though demanding, is the most profound act of self-love and the most powerful contribution we can make to a more genuine and compassionate world. As we navigate the intricate journey of dismantling the good person facade and embracing our authentic selves, we arrive at a profound realization. The liberation experienced by one individual does not exist in isolation. It reverberates, creating ripples that extend far beyond personal boundaries, touching families, workplaces, communities, and ultimately the collective consciousness. The courage to be truly, imperfectly oneself is not merely a solitary act of self-improvement. It is a catalyst for a more transparent, empathetic, and genuinely compassionate world. This chapter explores the transformative power of this collective authenticity, examining how individual shifts redefine societal goodness and foster environments where facades become not only unnecessary, but also incongruous with the prevailing spirit of integrity. The individual's shift from performative goodness to intrinsic authenticity initiates a powerful and collective ripple effect. When one person chooses vulnerability over pretense, others are tacitly invited to do the same. This often begins within intimate relationships, where a partner's willingness to drop their guard can inspire reciprocal honesty, deepening connection and trust. In professional settings, a leader's courageous display of vulnerability, admitting a mistake, asking for help, or openly discussing a personal struggle, can dismantle the organizational facade of infallibility, fostering psychological safety and encouraging genuine collaboration. Colleagues seeing their leader model authenticity feel empowered to bring their full selves to work, leading to more innovative problem-solving, reduced stress, and a stronger sense of belonging. The carefully constructed layers of corporate politeness and competitive posturing begin to thin, replaced by a more grounded and human interaction. Similarly, within social circles, the friend who dares to be genuinely honest about their struggles, rather than presenting a curated image of success, often finds their honesty met with relief and a deeper bond from others who have felt similarly isolated by their own performative efforts. This collective shedding of masks creates a virtuous cycle where authenticity begets authenticity, gradually eroding the unspoken societal contract that demands constant performance. This burgeoning collective authenticity inherently leads to a necessary redefinition of societal goodness. For too long, our cultures have equated goodness with outward displays of virtue, performative acts of charity, and the meticulous adherence to social norms, often irrespective of underlying motivation. We have celebrated the visible acts of philanthropy, the impeccably behaved public figure, and the loudest voices in virtue signalling, often overlooking the quiet acts of genuine kindness or the internal struggle that true ethical living demands. Society has inadvertently rewarded the facade, creating systems where appearing good is often more advantageous than being good. However, as more individuals prioritize internal integrity over external validation, the collective gaze begins to shift. We start to question the motivations behind grand gestures, discerning between genuine empathy and strategic self-promotion. We move away from a transactional view of goodness where one performs virtuous acts to gain praise or avoid censure, towards a more intrinsic understanding where goodness emanates from a place of genuine compassion and a commitment to ethical principles, regardless of external recognition. This re-evaluation challenges the very structures that incentivize facades, from the algorithms that reward performative wokeness on social media to corporate cultures that prioritize optics over genuine ethical practice. True. Or sincere intention, a concept central to many spiritual traditions, becomes not just a personal aspiration but a collective value, subtly reshaping our collective moral compass. With this redefinition comes the opportunity to cultivate environments of authentic engagement. This begins in our educational systems, where we can move beyond rote learning and superficial achievements to foster emotional literacy, critical thinking, and a deep sense of self-worth in children. By encouraging genuine expression, valuing effort over perfection, and teaching self-compassion, we can equip future generations with the tools to navigate life without needing to construct elaborate facades. In professional settings, organizations can intentionally foster psychological safety by promoting transparent communication, valuing integrity over mere compliance, and creating spaces where vulnerability is seen as a strength, not a weakness. This involves leadership modeling authenticity and creating policies that support genuine human well-being rather than demanding an unsustainable veneer of productivity. In the digital realm, we are challenged to move beyond the curated highlight reels and performative activism that dominates social media. We can consciously choose to engage in mindful digital presence, seeking out and creating spaces for genuine dialogue, critical inquiry, and authentic connection, thereby challenging the superficiality that often defines online interactions. Even within spiritual communities, the shift towards authenticity encourages a deeper engagement with faith, moving beyond dogma and ritual to foster genuine spiritual experience, emphasizing humility, self-awareness, and selfless service, rather than adherence to prescribed roles or the performance of piety. Crucially, the journey towards a more authentic world also necessitates embracing imperfection and the inherent complexities of the human condition. The good person facade often stems from a deep-seated fear of inadequacy, a belief that our flaws render us unlovable or unacceptable. As we dismantle this facade, we learn that true goodness does not equate to flawlessness. Instead, it involves acknowledging our shadows, our vulnerabilities, and our inevitable capacity for error. It is in the radical acceptance of our own imperfections that we cultivate profound self-compassion, which then extends naturally to others. We come to understand that everyone is engaged in their own struggle, often masked by their own carefully constructed facades. This understanding fosters empathy, allowing us to approach others with grace and non-judgment, recognizing that their defensive behaviors or performative actions are often expressions of their own fear, pain, or unaddressed needs. This move away from a rigid binary judgment of good-bad towards a more nuanced, compassionate understanding of humanity is essential for building truly inclusive and supportive communities. Forgiveness both of ourselves and of others becomes a cornerstone of this authentic existence, releasing us from the burden of past mistakes and the resentment of others' failings. This collective shift, however, is not a destination but an ongoing practice, demanding continuous grace, resilience, and growth. The societal pressures that encourage facades are deeply ingrained and will not disappear overnight. There will be moments of regression where the temptation to revert to old patterns of performance or people-pleasing will arise. The work of self-awareness, boundary setting, and inner validation continues throughout life. Yet armed with the tools of self-compassion and the understanding that authenticity is a journey, not a fixed state, we can navigate these setbacks with greater ease. Spiritual practices, whatever their form, continue to serve as anchors, grounding us in our deepest values and reminding us of our intrinsic worth, independent of external approval. The continuous refinement of our self-awareness allows us to detect the subtle stirrings of the ego's desire for praise or the fear of disapproval, enabling us to consciously choose authenticity in each moment. Ultimately, we envision a future where the echoes of authenticity resonate deeply, fostering a world characterized by genuine connection, profound empathy, and systemic integrity. Imagine societies where leaders prioritize truth and service over image, where educational institutions cultivate inner wisdom over external metrics, and where digital spaces facilitate meaningful dialogue over superficial posturing. This is not a utopian fantasy, but a tangible outcome of countless individual acts of courage. The courage to look inward, to heal, and to present oneself to the world without pretense. This essay began by dissecting the psychological and spiritual dimensions of the good person facade, revealing its pervasive nature and its significant costs. We conclude by affirming that the journey of dismantling this facade, though challenging, offers the most profound liberation, not just for the individual, but for the collective human spirit. It is an invitation to each of us to contribute to a more compassionate world. One authentic interaction, one honest conversation, and one courageous act of being truly, imperfectly ourselves at a time. The path is open, the work is ongoing, and the promise of genuine connection awaits. The individual journey beyond the good person facade is not merely an isolated act of personal liberation. It is the genesis of a profound societal transformation. As we have explored, the ripple effect of individual authenticity promises to redefine collective goodness, cultivate environments of genuine engagement, embrace imperfection, and ultimately contribute to a more transparent, empathetic, and compassionate world. In this chapter, we will delve deeper into the mechanics and manifestations of this collective evolution, examining how the dismantling of the facade on a broader scale reshapes our social fabric, our institutions, and our understanding of what it means to be a truly good society. The pervasive nature of the good person facade has, for too long, distorted our collective understanding of virtue. Society, in its pursuit of order and perceived morality, has often inadvertently rewarded performance over genuine integrity. We have praised the outward show of charity while overlooking the internal motivations, celebrated the public pronouncements of righteousness while ignoring the private inconsistencies. This has created a culture where the appearance of goodness often outweighs its authentic presence, where the meticulously crafted image becomes the currency of social capital. When individuals begin to shed their facades, a fundamental shift occurs in the collective consciousness. The societal definition of goodness starts to migrate from external metrics: how many likes a virtuous post receives, how much one publicly donates, how perfectly one adheres to prescribed social roles, to internal integrity. We begin to recognize and value sincerity, vulnerability, courage as the true hallmarks of a good person rather than flawless performance. This redefinition challenges the very reward systems that have long perpetuated the facade. Instead of applauding the loudest virtue signaler, we learn to discern and honor the quiet, consistent acts of kindness performed without expectation of recognition. We move from a culture that demands perfection to one that celebrates genuine effort, even when imperfectly executed. This shift has profound implications for the architecture of our relationships and communities. The good person facade thrives in environments where trust is superficial, built upon shared illusions of perfection. When authenticity takes root, relationships cease to be transactional performances and evolve into spaces of genuine connection. Trust is no longer predicated on the other person always being good or right in a performative sense, but on their willingness to be real, to admit mistakes, and to show up with their whole imperfect selves. This fosters a deeper, more resilient form of connection, one that can withstand conflict and challenge because it is grounded in understanding and empathy, not fragile pretense. Central to this transformation is the cultivation of psychological safety within groups and communities. Where facades dominate, individuals constantly fear exposure, judgment, or rejection. This fear stifles innovation, discourages honest feedback, and prevents true collaboration. In an authentic environment, psychological safety means that individuals feel safe to take risks, to voice dissenting opinions, to admit errors, and to ask for help without fear of punitive consequences or social ostracization. This isn't about an absence of standards or accountability, but rather a context where growth and learning are prioritized over blame and shame. It allows for constructive conflict, where disagreements are seen as opportunities for deeper understanding and collective problem-solving rather than threats to one's image or social standing. When we are free from the burden of maintaining a perfect facade, our capacity for genuine empathy expands, allowing us to connect with others on a more human level, recognizing our shared struggles and aspirations. The impact of collective authenticity extends far beyond interpersonal relationships, permeating our public spheres and institutions. Imagine a political landscape where leaders are driven by genuine service and a commitment to truth, rather than the relentless pursuit of image and public approval. The good person facade in politics often manifests as grandstanding, performative outrage, and the prioritizing of poll numbers over substantive policy. A shift towards authenticity would demand leaders capable of vulnerability, admitting when they don't have all the answers, engaging in genuine dialogue across ideological divides, and prioritizing the collective good over personal gain or party loyalty. Such leaders would inspire trust not through their perceived infallibility, but through their integrity and their courage to be real. Similarly, corporate culture, often driven by quarterly reports and public relations, could undergo a significant transformation. Corporate social responsibility, CSR, which can sometimes serve as a sophisticated form of organizational facade, might evolve from a marketing tool to an ingrained ethical practice. When authenticity becomes a core value, companies move beyond performative philanthropy or greenwashing to genuinely integrate ethical considerations into every aspect of their operations, from supply chains to employee well-being. This fosters a workplace where employees feel valued for their contributions, not just their compliance, and where transparency replaces the often opaque layers of corporate pretense. Education, too, stands to benefit immensely. Our current educational systems often inadvertently reinforce the good person facade by prioritizing grades, standardized test scores, and external achievements over intrinsic learning, critical thinking, and emotional intelligence. Students are taught to perform for the grade, to echo approved answers, and to avoid mistakes at all costs. An authentic educational paradigm would foster environments where curiosity is paramount, where failure is reframed as a crucial component of learning, and where self-awareness and emotional literacy are considered as vital as academic prowess. It would encourage students to develop their unique voices to challenge assumptions, and to engage with the world with genuine inquiry rather than simply memorizing facts for external validation. Perhaps one of the most significant shifts lies in the collective embrace of imperfection. The good person facade is inherently a rejection of imperfection, a desperate attempt to project an image of flawless virtue. A society that collectively sheds this facade becomes a society that destigmatizes failure, mental health struggles, and human fallibility. We move away from a culture of shame and blame, where mistakes are hidden and vulnerabilities are concealed, towards one of learning and growth. This means creating spaces for rehabilitation and understanding rather than punitive judgment, fostering compassion for those who stumble, and recognizing that growth often emerges from our imperfections. The power of collective vulnerability lies in its ability to forge deeper bonds, reminding us of our shared humanity and our universal struggles. When we see others bravely reveal their authentic selves, it gives us permission to do the same, creating a virtuous cycle of openness and acceptance. Nurturing authenticity in future generations is a critical component of this societal transformation. Parenting, often burdened by societal expectations of raising perfect children, can shift its focus from external achievements to fostering intrinsic worth. Instead of pushing children to excel in every competitive arena, parents can prioritize emotional intelligence, empathy, resilience, and the courage to be oneself. Educational systems can complement this by integrating curricula that teach self-awareness, critical thinking about societal pressures, and the importance of ethical decision-making over mere compliance. Children raised in environments that value authenticity are less likely to adopt facades, instead developing a strong internal compass and the confidence to navigate a complex world with integrity. They learn that their worth is inherent, not contingent on external approval or performance. However, we must acknowledge that this societal shift is not without its challenges and inherent resistance. The inertia of established systems, deeply entrenched in patterns of performance and external validation, is formidable. There is often a fear of chaos, a concern that without the rigid structures of the facade, society might devolve into moral relativism or unchecked self-interest. This fear often masks a deeper resistance from the collective ego, which, much like the individual ego, benefits from the illusion of control and the comfort of predictable roles. The good person facade vieillot, while burdensome, also offers a sense of security and belonging even if superficial. Dismantling it on a societal level requires a collective act of courage, a willingness to sit with discomfort, and a sustained commitment to building new foundations based on transparency and genuine connection. The digital age presents both unique opportunities and significant obstacles to this collective transformation. While social media platforms have often amplified the good person facade through virtue signaling and curated self-presentations, they also hold the potential for unprecedented connection and the rapid dissemination of authentic narratives. The challenge lies in consciously shifting our engagement from performative displays to genuine sharing, from seeking external validation to fostering meaningful dialogue. This requires a collective discernment to distinguish between authentic expression and mere facade, and a commitment to creating digital spaces that prioritize genuine human connection over algorithmic engagement. Ultimately, the vision of a world transformed by collective authenticity is one characterized by profound transparency, deep empathy, and pervasive compassion. It is a world where trust is earned through integrity, not performance, where relationships are built on vulnerability, not pretense, and where societal structures are designed to foster human flourishing, not just economic growth or superficial order. This is not a utopian fantasy, but a continuous pilgrimage, a dynamic process of collective self-awareness and conscious choice. It requires each of us to not only shed our own facades, but to actively contribute to the creation of environments where authenticity is not just tolerated, but celebrated, cultivated, and deeply valued as the truest expression of human goodness. The journey beyond the facade, therefore, is not just a personal quest. It is a collective imperative, a pathway toward a more genuinely humane and interconnected future. Our journey through the labyrinth of the good person facade has brought us to a critical juncture, the realization that individual transformation, while foundational, is but the first stone in constructing a truly humane future. The shift from outward performance to intrinsic presence, from a fear-driven facade to a heart-centered authenticity, demands not only personal introspection, but a profound re-architecture of our collective spaces. We must move beyond the individual pilgrimage to a shared societal imperative, actively designing environments where sincerity, vulnerability, and genuine human connection are not just tolerated, but celebrated as the bedrock of collective well-being. The envisioning of such a world necessitates a radical redefinition of societal goodness. No longer can we equate virtue with flawless images, curated narratives, or the relentless pursuit of external validation. Instead, goodness must emerge from the fertile ground of integrity, the courage to be imperfect and the unwavering commitment to ethical action, even when unseen. This redefinition challenges the very infrastructure of our institutions, urging them to shed their own performative veneers and embrace a more transparent, empathetic, and ultimately more effective mode of operation. Consider the realm of our education. For too long, our educational systems have inadvertently reinforced the facade by prioritizing standardized testing, grade point averages, and a narrow definition of success that often rewards rote memorization and conformity over critical thinking, emotional intelligence, and creative expression. Students learn early that the right answer, the perfect project, or the model behavior is what garners approval, rather than the messy, iterative process of genuine learning and self-discovery. To dismantle the facade in education, we must cultivate learning environments that are psychologically safe, where mistakes are reframed as opportunities for growth. Curiosity is valued above compliance, and the development of character and intrinsic motivation supersedes the relentless pursuit of external accolades. We must teach children not just what to think, but how to think critically about societal pressures, how to feel and express their emotions authentically, and how to discern genuine purpose from performative achievement. This involves a pedagogical shift towards project-based learning, Socratic methods, and curricula that integrate social-emotional learning as centrally as academic subjects. When we empower students to embrace their authentic selves, we equip them with the resilience and self-awareness necessary to navigate a complex world without succumbing to the pressure of the facade. In the professional sphere, the implications of this re-architecture are equally profound. Traditional corporate cultures often inadvertently foster environments where impression management thrives. Employees may feel compelled to present an image of unwavering competence, perpetual optimism, and tireless dedication, fearing that any sign of vulnerability, uncertainty, or even a healthy work-life balance could jeopardize their career progression. This leads to burnout, stifled innovation, and a profound sense of isolation. Building an architecture of authenticity in the workplace requires a deliberate shift towards fostering cultures of psychological safety, where leaders model vulnerability, constructive feedback is normalized, and diverse perspectives are genuinely sought and valued. Authentic leadership, characterized by transparency, empathy, and a willingness to acknowledge personal limitations, becomes paramount. When leaders demonstrate that it's acceptable to be human, to make mistakes, to ask for help, to not have all the answers, they create a ripple effect that empowers employees to bring their whole selves to work. This not only enhances individual well-being, but also unlocks greater creativity, problem-solving, and ultimately organizational success. We must move beyond the always-on performance culture to one that values genuine contribution, sustainable effort, and the inherent dignity of each individual. The political and public discourse arenas present perhaps the most formidable challenges and the most urgent need for this re-architecture. In an age dominated by sound bites, spin doctors, and the relentless pursuit of public approval, the good person facade often manifests as populism, virtue signaling, and a deep cynicism regarding the motivations of those in power. Politicians, driven by electoral cycles and media scrutiny, frequently resort to crafting meticulously polished personas, making promises they cannot keep, and engaging in performative outrage rather than substantive dialogue. To inject authenticity into governance, we must demand and cultivate leaders who prioritize integrity, accountability, and genuine public service over image management. This requires a citizenry capable of discerning genuine commitment from performative rhetoric, a media ecosystem committed to nuanced reporting over sensationalism, and electoral processes that reward substance over superficiality. We must foster public forums where respectful disagreement is possible, where complex issues are explored with intellectual honesty, and where the pursuit of common ground supersedes partisan posturing. This is not a naive call for perfect leaders, but a demand for transparent ones. Leaders who are willing to admit when they don't know, to apologize when they err, and to engage in the difficult, often unpopular work of genuine governance rather than merely performing it. Even our digital culture and social media platforms, which have become potent amplifiers of the facade, must be re-architected. The curated highlight reels, the performative activism, and the relentless pursuit of likes and shares often create a distorted reality, fostering comparison, envy, and a profound sense of inadequacy. To counter this, we must cultivate digital literacy that empowers individuals to critically evaluate online presentations, recognize the constructed nature of digital identities, and prioritize genuine connection over superficial engagement. Platforms themselves could be redesigned to encourage more meaningful interactions, perhaps by de-emphasizing vanity metrics or by fostering smaller, more intimate communities. The goal is not to abandon these powerful tools, but to reclaim them as spaces for authentic expression and connection, rather than arenas for performative self-promotion. However, the path to building this architecture of authenticity is not without its formidable challenges. The inertia of established systems, deeply entrenched behavioral patterns, and the comfort of the familiar facade itself present significant resistance. Many individuals and institutions have benefited, or perceive themselves to have benefited, from the facade, finding safety in its predictable boundaries and the approval it often garners. The fear of vulnerability, of being exposed, judged, or rejected for one's authentic self, remains a potent deterrent. We must acknowledge that dismantling the facade, both personally and collectively, often entails a period of discomfort, awkwardness, and even backlash. Those who choose authenticity may initially face misunderstanding or criticism from those still deeply invested in the old paradigm. Therefore, the active steps in building this architecture are crucial. Advocacy and education play a pivotal role. We must continue to illuminate the true costs of the facade and articulate the profound benefits of authenticity using compelling narratives, empirical research, and accessible frameworks to demystify complex psychological and spiritual concepts. This involves open conversations in homes, schools, workplaces, and public forums about what it truly means to be good, shifting the focus from external perception to internal alignment. Crucially, we need models of authentic behavior. When leaders, public figures, and individuals within our communities courageously demonstrate vulnerability, admit mistakes, and prioritize integrity over image, they create powerful permission structures for others to do the same. These are the pioneers who chart new territory, showing that life beyond the facade is not only possible but infinitely more fulfilling. We must also actively create and protect safe spaces where authenticity can flourish without fear of immediate judgment or retribution. These can be formal spaces, like therapeutic groups or supportive workplaces, or informal ones, like close-knit communities or families committed to honest communication. These spaces serve as crucibles where individuals can experiment with vulnerability, practice self-compassion, and receive the affirmation necessary to sustain their authentic journey. Finally, policy and systemic reforms are essential to embed authenticity into the very fabric of our society. This could involve incentivizing transparency and ethical conduct in corporations, reforming educational assessment to value holistic development, or promoting media literacy initiatives that empower citizens to critically engage with information. While these structural changes are often slow and complex, they are indispensable for creating an environment where authenticity is not merely an individual aspiration, but a societal expectation. This grand project of re-architecting our world towards authenticity is, by its very nature, an ongoing pilgrimage. It is not a destination we arrive at, but a continuous process of learning, adapting, and refining. There will be moments of triumph and moments of setback, periods of clarity and periods of confusion. Individually, we will continue to encounter new facets of our own facades, requiring renewed commitment to self-awareness and self-compassion. Collectively, our societies will face evolving challenges that test our commitment to transparency, empathy, and integrity. The work is never truly finished, for human nature is dynamic, and the pressures to conform and perform are ever present. Yet the vision remains compelling. A world where the good person facade becomes an archaic concept, a relic of a less conscious era. Imagine societies where trust is built on genuine connection rather than carefully constructed images, where empathy flows freely because individuals are comfortable with their own imperfections, where innovation thrives because fear of failure has been replaced by a hunger for learning, where governance serves the true well-being of its citizens rather than the ego of its leaders. This is not a utopian fantasy, but a deeply human aspiration grounded in the profound psychological and spiritual truths we have explored. It is a world where the collective embraces imperfection, moving from shame to learning and to growth, fostering environments of psychological safety and authentic engagement across all institutions. Our collective imperative, then, is to consciously and courageously participate in this re-architecture. It is to choose authenticity, not just for our own liberation, but for the liberation of all. It is to build bridges of understanding, to dismantle walls of pretense, and to lay the foundations for a future where true goodness, born of integrity and compassion, illuminates every corner of human experience. This is the enduring legacy we are called to create, a testament to our shared humanity and our collective capacity for profound, transformative change. The journey continues, and we together are its architects.